This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia. Hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by ItalianCitizenshipassistance.com. Of course, we are back at it again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I am doing great, thank you. And I'm Rafael Di Furia, and in this episode, we wanted to talk about how the process has changed for Italian citizenship by marriage as well as residency. And to just jump directly into this episode, Marco, would you mind giving us a little bit of background on these topics before we get into how they've actually changed?
So we're going to be talking about Italian citizenship through marriage and Italian citizenship through residency, and we're not going to make any reference to Italian citizenship by descent. So this episode is not going to be for those who are interested in Italian citizenship by descent. And let's start maybe with citizenship through marriage, which is evidently the process that somebody needs to go through if they're married to an Italian citizen. And I think the very first interesting fact about Italian citizenship through marriage is that under Italian law, the non-Italian spouse doesn't have to reside in Italy at all in order to be able to apply for Italian citizenship through marriage. So if the couple resides abroad, the Italian spouse and the non-Italian spouse, they both live abroad. They never lived in Italy, maybe because also the Italian spouse got Italian citizenship by descent through an Italian consulate, so neither of them ever set foot in Italy. Well, it's possible for the non-Italian spouse to acquire Italian citizenship through marriage without having to relocate to Italy. And that is something that doesn't happen in a lot of other countries. I'm thinking, for example, to the US, where you have to reside in the US for a number of years in order to be able to acquire US citizenship based on marriage. The only difference is that if you are not residing in Italy, you have to wait a little bit longer from the date of the marriage. You have to wait 3 years before you are able to apply for citizenship through marriage. On the other hand, if you live in Italy, you have to wait 2 years from the date of the marriage, and then you can apply for Italian citizenship through marriage. Also, if you have children who are minors, the non-Italian spouse can apply for Italian citizenship through marriage after 1 year if the couple resides in Italy, or 1.5 years if the couple resides outside of Italy. So the wait time is basically cut into half.
So beyond this time requirement for how long has elapsed since the day that you were married, what are the other requirements that are in place, just to quickly run through those?
So the first requirement when you begin the process is to collect criminal background checks from all the states where the non-Italian spouse has resided, and those have a 6 months validity. So it's important to collect those simultaneously, because the first one that you get will expire after 6 months. So it's important that you collect them all at the same time. And I'm saying this also because if we're talking about somebody who is a U.S. citizen, the criminal background checks are necessary from all of the states in which this person has resided and from the FBI. So you might have to collect a high number of criminal background checks in order to be able to apply for citizenship through marriage. Also, the criminal background checks, they need to be legalized and translated. So these activities take time, and that's why it's important that you start collecting them all simultaneously, because like I said, they will expire after 6 months. You will also need your birth certificate legalized and translated. And finally, you will need the Italian marriage record. Before you begin the process, it's very important that you make sure that your Italian spouse has registered the marriage record in the Italian municipality, which is where you have to collect it from. So you will need the marriage certificate issued from Italy, not the one issued in your country. If you got married outside of Italy, you will need the Italian ones. So make sure that the foreign marriage certificate has been recorded before you even start thinking about this whole process. There is also now a language requirement, so you have to present a language certificate, but we're going to talk about that later in the episode. Once you have all your documents together, what you have to do is you have to go onto the website of the Ministry of Interior and submit your application digitally. So you will need to upload all of the scans of the documents that I just mentioned that you have collected in those 6 months, and just submit the application together with the payment, which is currently 250 euros. And after the application has been submitted, you will be called by the consulate if you reside abroad, or by the Italian Prefettura, which is a local office pertaining to the office of the Ministry of Interior, if you reside in Italy. And the purpose of the meeting will be to submit the hard copies of all the documents that you have collected in the months prior to the submission.
That's interesting to hear that there's this similarity in the process, both in your country of residence as well as in Italy, whereas we see sometimes when it comes to making those applications for citizenship by descent in the US versus in Italy, there are some differences and nuances there. Whereas with this, that's really cool that there's just one system that you actually put your documents into, and then you get the call back from there, from the respective authority. But moving on, I'm just curious, what are some of the laws in place for Italian citizenship by marriage, and how have they changed over the years?
The process is regulated by Article 5, 6, 7, and 8 of Law 91 of 1992. And the big change that we saw was in 2016, when Italy allowed for same-sex marriages and civil unions to be recorded in Italy. So same-sex marriage certificates, some marriages between same-sex couples and civil unions were not allowed in Italy before 2016. And what happened is that the government at that point made it possible for same-sex couples who got married abroad to register their marriage certificates in Italy. And it also allowed for same-sex couples who wanted to enter into a civil union in Italy to actually do so and be able to register their civil union certificate. And also it allowed for same-sex couples and couples in a civil union to be able to apply for citizenship through marriage at the same conditions basically as an heterosexual couple. So the wait time is the same, the rules are the same, and that happened in 2016. So that was the first major change that we saw. The second major change happened in 2018 with the Salvini decree. The government back then made some major reforms in the law, and one of those was about Italian citizenship through marriage. So the biggest change basically was about the introduction of a language requirement. So before then, you didn't have to be able to speak Italian at any level. But for all the applications submitted after the law came into effect towards the end of 2018, it was necessary to have a language certificate to be able to submit the application. So one of the documents required for the applications was the language certificate. Not a language certificate released by any school, but only certificate released by an institution approved by the Italian government. And there are many schools, for our US audience who's watching, there are many schools in the US who are approved by the Italian government. And the level required is B1, which is lower intermediate. It's not advanced. It's not basic. It's somewhat in the middle. It's not necessary, meaning it's not a legal requirement to go to classes, to take lessons. So all you have to do is take the test and pass it. And like I said, the level required is lower intermediate. And with the certificate in hand, then you can collect all the other documents and submit your application. The other big change that we saw in 2018, which was included in the same law, was the increase of the maximum processing time for these applications. And again, I'm talking about the maximum processing time. So in theory, the processing time could be lower, but the maximum was 2 years before 2018, and then it was brought up to 48 months. So the new maximum processing time for applications for citizenship through marriage, and again, only for applications for citizenship through marriage and through residency, we're going to talk about that in a second, but was brought up to 48 months. But what I'm saying is that that processing time does not apply to citizenship by descent. So we're only talking about citizenship through marriage. And then the other change that we saw in 2018 with the same law was the increase of the application fee, which went from 200 euros to 250 euros. But moving on to the next changes, they happened in 2020 with a law made by a different government. The law was came into effect towards the end of 2020. And what changed again was the maximum processing time, which this time was lowered from 48 months to a maximum of 2 years. So the maximum processing time for citizenship through marriage became 2 years from the date of the submission of the application. And the law only said that only in case of exceptional circumstances, the maximum processing time could have been extended to a maximum of 3 years. And this is the current maximum processing time established by the law about Italian citizenship through marriage. All of the other requirements remained basically the same. So this is what happened. No other changes were made with regards to citizenship through marriage. Only maybe one clarification here, which is worthwhile making, is that the maximum processing time, which again was 2 years, was decreased to 2 years in 2020, at the end of 2020, only applied to the applications that were submitted after the law came into effect. So all of the other applications which were pending when the law came into effect, to those, the maximum processing time of 48 months still applied. And finally, at the time of the recording of this episode, the latest change that we saw happen in 2022 when the Italian Constitutional Court rendered a decision which made a provision in the law that basically stated that the passing of the Italian spouse during the process caused the inability to move forward with the process unconstitutional. So it made that specific provision invalid because it was against the Italian constitution. In other words, that means that once the application for citizenship through marriage is submitted, if the Italian spouse passes away, the non-Italian spouse can continue with the process and can obtain an Italian passport.
Well, that's all fascinating. I mean, that's a very big update there, that a person wouldn't necessarily have to not just lose their spouse, but just lose their residence, lose their ability to continue, or not lose their residence, but lose their ability to get citizenship. I mean, that is a massive step, or massive change rather. And since that is the most recent update when it comes to Italian citizenship by marriage, what is the landscape of residency, Italian citizenship by residency looking like? What's kind of the background there, and what are the changes that have come up through the years?
Italian citizenship through residency is a way to acquire Italian citizenship based on residency in Italy. So it's necessary to reside in Italy for a number of years before you're able to apply for Italian citizenship based on residency, specifically for EU citizens. So people who have citizenship in another EU country, they can apply for Italian citizenship after residing in Italy for 4 years. People who have Italian ancestors up to the second degree, so people who have an Italian-born parent or grandparent, and normally that applies to people who don't qualify for citizenship by descent. Those people can apply for citizenship based on residency after 3 years of full-time residency in Italy. And finally, everybody else who doesn't fall in the first two categories can apply for Italian citizenship through residency after 10 years of legal residency in Italy. The process is very similar to the process for citizenship through marriage, meaning you have to pass a language test, you have to collect criminal background checks from every state and country of residency, and you have to provide your birth certificate duly legalized and translated into Italian. In addition to those requirements, there is also an income requirement, meaning that unlike citizenship through marriage, to apply for citizenship through residency, you have to have a very basic income per year, which is roughly, at the time of the recording of this episode, 8,000 euros per year. Once you have collected all the documents, so criminal background check, birth certificate, documents regarding your income and language certificate, you can submit your application online through the website of the Ministry of Interior, and then you will be called for an appointment at the local prefettura to submit all of the originals, and then the application will be processed. And once the application has been processed, you can take the oath, and so there will be a ceremony during which you take the oath of allegiance to the Italian Republic, and then you will be able to apply for an Italian passport. Now, the changes in the process that happened during the years are somewhat similar to the changes that we just went through with regard to citizenship through marriage, meaning that in 2018, the law, towards the end of 2018, the law changed, and basically back then, the application fee was increased from 200 euros to 250 euros, and the maximum processing time for all the applications that were submitted after the law came into effect went up to 48 months. So it changed from 2 years to a maximum of 48 months. And then the next change happened in 2020 when a new law modified the maximum processing time for all the applications that were submitted after the law came into effect. And the processing time went down from 48 months to 2 years, so a maximum of 2 years, which in some circumstances can be extended to 3 years.
Wow. Well, Marco, thank you so much for sharing all of these updates and all of this information. This has been an information-packed episode. And to round this episode out, of course, if anybody needs help with going through the process for Italian citizenship by marriage or residency, how can they get in contact with you and your team?
People can contact us through our website, italiancitizenshipassistance.com, or give us a call. The number is on the website.
Absolutely fantastic. And of course, if you're interested in more information about Italian citizenship, be sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel as well as the audio-only podcast. But of course, if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, then you're also subscribed to the Italian Real Estate Podcast, where Marco and I talk about some of the more practical aspects of purchasing and renting property in Italy, as well as different parts of the country to consider. Of course, also, if you're interested in more information about life abroad, living abroad, and life as a dual citizen expat, be sure to come over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia, where we get into some of those topics, talking about things from how things work on a day-to-day basis. But thank you again, Mr. Marco Permunian, for making yourself available for this episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by Italiancitizenshipassistance.com. Of course, I'm Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we will see you all next time. Later.
Thank you.